He owned.
He owns.
He's a landowner.
He's a landowner, 1880. 80 acres of tilled land.
80?
80 acres, which is pretty decent.
That's 2 times 40.
That's 2 times 40. He's doubled up your, you got some catching up to do with that 40 acres.
I know.
When slavery was brought to an end with the 13th Amendment in 1865, General Sherman ordered each freed head of household to be granted up to 40 acres of land, which was referred to as 40 acres and a mule. For the majority of slaves, the promise was never honored. So even though they were freed, most emancipated slaves had no choice but to rely on their former owners for a living. It was this event in history which inspired Spike Lee to name his production company 40 Acres and a Mule.
So let's see if we can find Mr. Mars Woodall. And this is the Census of Agriculture, Twiggs County, state of Georgia, 1880. Here down this line here is actually Woodall Mars. So he's here in the agricultural census. He's in the agricultural census if you're an independent farmer, if you're a renter, if you're an owner. That says, I'm an owner of this land.
He owned.
He owns.
He's a landowner.
He's a landowner, 1880. 80 acres of tilled land.
80?
80 acres, which is pretty
That's 2
decent.
times 40.
That's 2 times 40. He's doubled up your, you got some catching up to do with that 40 acres.
I know.
Plus 50 acres of woodland. Plus, next line over.
75?
75 acres of other land that he can develop if he wants to. He can use it as pasture.
Is it plausible that he bought this land from Woodall or was loaned to him?
It sure is. People are complicated. People are idiosyncratic. And if you live next to somebody for your whole life, sometimes bad things happen and sometimes good things happen. Sometimes people actually come to respect each other despite the power differential between them. And so frequently, ex-slaves who got ahead, who got land, used relationships with previous masters that they had some kind of good relationship with to put in a good word for them. If it wasn't Woodall giving them a loan, is going down to the bank and saying, you know, I can speak for this man. I think he's a hard worker, he's a responsible guy. Because once you get that first break, the next break's easier. Right? Yeah. It's just getting something to work with.
So it comes down to ownership of land.
It did.
Get some land.
It did for these people.
Get some land. Amazing. He was a farmer, had a lot of land. That was the #1 goal coming out of slavery. You wanted to be a landowner. You lived off the land, you worked the land. This area, Twiggs County, in middle Georgia, was hostile for Negroes at that time. The Klan was roaming. This area was also known for lynching. So in order to do what he did, he had great adversity. Before I left, Mark gave me a map to find the land Mars owned. That's Georgia clay right there, red Georgia clay. It's a magnificent view. And at one time, my great-great-grandfather, Mars Jackson, owned this land. In tribute to Mars, I had sent to me from New York what I wore in my first film. She's Gonna Have It. This is it. This is what Mars looked like. Many years later, but it all started here. It was not an accident that I called up my grandmother, asked her for a name. That was a spirit. That was a spirit that made me pick up the phone and say, Mama, I need a name. That was the spirit of Mars that made that happen. And his wife, Lucinda. United States of America may not have given Mars his 40 acres on a mule, but it looks like he did much better than that. He had more than 80 acres. Before I go, there's one last thing I must do. Dig up some of this land. I'm gonna show it to my children. Say, this is where you came from. This Georgia red clay. Sun's about to set here. And we gotta get out of here. They said, don't let the sun go down on your black ass. You better get out of town, boy. You know what's good for y'all. All right, yes, master. I'm leaving right now. I don't want no trouble. Just passing through. Minding my business. Good day. The red clay in my hands is the same dirt Mars worked, making a life for himself and his family after the Civil War. Unfortunately, no one knows what happened to Mars or how he lost his land after the 1880s. But he set the bar high early. To go from a slave to a landowner, now I know where my family gets that entrepreneurial spirit.